All right, so today we are taking a deep dive into NIO.
NIO.
Yeah, a company making waves in the EV market.
Absolutely.
We've got this research here, and it's inspired by Warren Buffett's value investing principles.
Mm-hmm.
By the end of this deep dive, you will know if NIO stock is something you should be keeping an eye on.
What's really interesting about NIO is they're not just making cars, they're trying to build a whole ecosystem around them.
So they're not like your typical car company then?
Not really, no.
So how is their business model different?
Well, they've got this thing called Battery as a Service, BOSS for short.
BOSS.
Yeah. And it means that customers don't have to buy the battery with the car. They can just subscribe to a battery plan.
Interesting.
So that lowers the initial price, and they've got more flexibility when it comes to upgrades later on.
That's smart. It's like they're addressing people's worries about EVs head on.
Right.
Like the cost of the battery and how long it lasts.
Exactly.
And they're generating revenue through charging, after-sale services, and even a certified pre-owned program. It seems like they're really focused on the customer experience.
That's right.
But before we get too into NIO itself, let's take a look at the EV market as a whole.
Okay.
Because this isn't just some fad that's going to disappear. This is a major shift in the auto industry, right?
Yeah, I mean, look at the number.
What kind of growth are we talking about here?
Well, the global EV market is already worth over $500 billion.
Wow.
And projections show that it'll reach nearly $2 trillion by 2032.
That's huge.
Yeah, and all the traditional car companies, they're trying to adapt as fast as they can.
And with good reason.
Yeah,
So NIO seems to be in a good position then.
they do.
But let's get back to them specifically.
Good eye.
To really understand whether NIO is a good investment, we need to look at their leadership. The CEO, William Lai, he's been called the Elon Musk of China.
Yeah.
Is that a fair comparison, do you think?
Well, Lai's definitely got that same visionary kind of energy, and he's created a culture of innovation at NIO.
Right.
It's not just about the cars. It's about creating a lifestyle brand.
A lifestyle brand.
Yeah, one centered around joy and aspiration.
It's interesting how he's bringing emotion into an industry that's usually seen as pretty practical.
Yeah, it's clever.
But vision alone doesn't guarantee success.
No, it doesn't.
How has NIO's leadership team performed when things get tough?
Well, they've actually shown that they're pretty resilient. They got through some financial difficulties, production issues because of that global semiconductor shortage
Right.
and all those COVID-19 restrictions.
So they've been through a lot then,
They have,
which is a good sign.
definitely.
But at the end of the day, investors are going to be looking at the bottom line.
That's true.
So what about NIO's financial health?
Well, that's where things get a little more complicated.
Okay.
They've got a market cap of about $9.32 billion,
Okay.
but they haven't actually been profitable consistently yet.
So high growth, but no profits yet.
Yeah, that's about right.
That's a familiar story, isn't it?
It is,
Especially for newer companies.
especially in a fast-growing industry like this.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
What about their debt? That's always something the investors need to keep in mind.
Yeah, their debt-to-equity ratio is pretty high, which means they're using a lot of borrowed money to run their business.
Right.
So that's definitely something to keep an eye on as they grow.
Okay.
They have taken steps to manage it, though, like repurchasing convertible notes,
Oh.
but their earnings are still up and down, and their net working capital, it's been trending downwards.
So some bumps in the road financially.
Yeah.
We're only halfway through our deep dive, though, so stick with us for part 2.
Okay.
We'll be exploring market sentiment, ownership structure, and doing a full risk assessment to really figure out what NIO's potential is.
Sounds good.
And we'll be ending with something pretty thought-provoking that you won't want to miss.
Oh, I'm intrigued.
So stay tuned.
I will. So let's talk about how the market feels about NIO.
Okay, so NIO's stock, it's been pretty volatile, right? Up and down.
Yeah, it has.
What's the overall sentiment like?
I'd say it's mixed, kind of reflects the uncertainty around the whole EV sector.
Right.
Analyst ratings, they're all over the place.
Really?
Yeah, some of them are worried about NIO becoming profitable and their long-term growth.
So some analysts are hesitant,
Yeah.
but are investors shying away?
Well, not necessarily. There's a lot of short interest in the stock,
Which means,
which means some investors are betting against NIO.
okay.
But remember, individual investors, they hold the biggest stake in the company.
Yeah, we talked about that earlier.
Right.
Seems like retail investors are pretty optimistic.
They are.
Let's take a closer look at the ownership structure. Help us understand who owns NIO.
Well, it's a pretty diverse mix.
Like,
You've got individual investors, of course.
hmm?
Then you've got institutional investors like hedge funds, pension funds,
Right.
and even some public companies own shares.
Interesting. So individual investors are the biggest group.
That's right.
What does that tell us?
It shows that a lot of people believe in the company.
They're putting their money where their mouth is.
Exactly.
It's not just blind faith, though, is it?
No, definitely not.
Because William Lai, the CEO, he owns a big chunk of the company, too.
He does, which aligns his interests with the other shareholders.
Okay, so they've got a compelling vision,
Yeah.
a diverse group of investors,
Mm-hmm.
but every company has risks.
Of course.
What are some of the potential problems NIO might run into?
Well, a SWOT analysis can help us with that.
Okay, remind me what that is again.
It stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats.
Right.
So starting with strengths, NIO has really good brand recognition, especially in China.
Yeah, and they've built up a premium image.
Exactly.
Their battery tech and the battery as a service model, those are big advantages.
They are.
And their autonomous driving tech, that's got to be a strength too, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And that charging infrastructure with the battery swapping stations, that's a big one.
That's impressive.
It is.
So, a lot of good things to build on.
For sure.
But what about the weaknesses? What could hold NIO back?
Well, the biggest one is probably their profitability.
They're not consistently making money.
Right. And their operating expenses are high.
So they're spending a lot.
Yeah, and they're still relying on outside funding.
Okay, so they need to find a way to make consistent profits.
Yeah, definitely.
What else should investors be cautious about?
Well, they're launching multiple brands at the same time.
Like what?
NVO and Firefly.
Right.
And that can be tricky.
Yeah, managing all of that.
Exactly. And their production capacity is limited compared to some of the bigger players.
So they can't make as many cars.
Right. And then there's that high debt-to-equity ratio we talked about.
Still a concern.
Yeah.
So some internal challenges there.
There are.
But even with those weaknesses, there are always opportunities, right?
Absolutely.
What could help NIO grow in the future?
Well, expanding into new markets with their different brands
That makes sense.
and government incentives for EVs, those could be a big help.
Right, like subsidies and tax breaks.
Exactly.
And of course, the global demand for EVs is only going to go up.
It is.
Huge potential market for NIO.
Huge.
They're in a good position to capitalize on that,
They are, especially as technology improves.
like autonomous driving and battery tech.
Exactly.
But we can't forget about the threats.
No, we can't.
What are some of the things that could hurt NIO?
Well, the competition in the Chinese EV market is fierce.
Lots of companies fighting for market share.
Yeah, and that could lead to lower prices, which would hurt everyone.
So they need to stay ahead of the game.
They do.
Constant innovation.
Absolutely.
And what about government policies? Could those change?
They could, yeah, and subsidies could be reduced or even disappear.
That would have a big impact.
It would.
And expanding internationally, that's not easy.
No, it's not, especially in a market like the U.S.
Right. Breaking into a new market is tough.
It is.
Speaking of the U.S., remember that thought-provoking point we promised you?
Oh, yeah.
Well, get this. NIO has plans to start selling cars in the U.S. by 2025.
Wow, that's ambitious.
It is, going up against Tesla on their home turf.
David versus Goliath.
Exactly.
They need to build brand awareness from scratch.
And deal with all the regulations.
Right.
It's a big risk,
It is.
but potentially a big reward, too.
Definitely.
Do you think they can do it?
It's hard to say. There are so many factors involved.
Right.
NIO's got a good track record of innovation,
Mm-hmm.
and they're really focused on the customer experience.
Yeah.
Those things could give them an edge.
But they'll have to adjust to the American market.
Absolutely.
Make sure what they're offering appeals to U.S. consumers.
Exactly.
So it's not just a matter of bringing their products and services over here
No, it's not. They need to tailor their approach.
to the American market.
Yeah.
And they have to do all of this while managing their current business.
Right. They can't spread themselves too thin.
It's a lot to juggle.
It is.
Sounds like their success in the U.S. depends on them executing perfectly.
It does.
It's a big gamble,
Yeah.
but with a big potential payoff.
That's a good way to put it.
So after all this, what's your take on NIO?
NIO is a really interesting company with a lot of potential.
Okay.
They're pushing boundaries. They're innovating. They want to change what it means to be an EV company.
Right.
But they've got big challenges ahead of them, financially and strategically.
High risk, high reward.
Exactly. Investors need to think about that carefully.
NIO is a company to watch,
Definitely.
but it's not for everyone.
No, not at all.
Well, this deep dive has given us a lot to think about.
It has.
And we want to hear from you, too.
Yeah, tell us what you think.
Head over to the comments and let us know your thoughts on NIO.
Do you think they can make it in the U.S. market?
Let's discuss.
And if you want more deep dives like this,
on all sorts of innovative companies.
make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Stock Analytics AI.
We've got tons of research waiting for you there.
And just a reminder, all the sources we used for this deep dive are listed in the description below.
Do your own research, come to your own conclusions.
And a word of caution, all of our research is generated using AI.
So remember, always consult with a financial advisor before making any investment decisions.
Your financial future is your responsibility.
Exactly.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into NIO.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll see you next time for another exciting exploration of the business world.
See you then.